So you chose to play pawn to c5 here. Congratulations, this is what Tao played in this position. Very good move. Well, if you're trying to play like Tao, that is. I'm not entirely sure if pawn to c5 is correct in a mathematical sense of the word, but it's a Tao-like move. It's what Tao played, and it's a good way to try to get to the black king. You're moving forwards, you're trying to open up the position, so well done. You picked the correct response here, pawn to c5. So, like I mentioned before, the main idea is really to open up black's position while the king is still on e8. You have two bishops, so opening up the position generally helps you because two bishops, that's when you want to open up the position. So let's see how the game continued anyway after this correct move, pawn to c5. So pawn to c5, black now has two ways to capture this pawn on c5. And he's obviously got to try to win this pawn, otherwise he hasn't really gained anything. So the two options here are either d takes c5 or b takes c5. Now in the game, black played d takes c5, which looks like probably the best response. Let's just have a quick look at what happens if black had taken on c5 with his b pawn. So b takes c5, and the one negative thing about this move, well the main negative thing, is that black's now opened up the b file. So for example, the bishop on b7 is now a target because the b pawn's moved away. And for example, another reason black would find it hard to castle queenside now, because if he castles queenside, he's going to have this line of attack that's going to come straight at him. So after this move, b takes c5, a natural response would be something like rook to b1. But I think an even more accurate way to play this is to take advantage of the position of the black king immediately by playing queen to a4 check. And this already causes black some problems here. For example, queen to d7. So you obviously don't really want to move your king unless you have to. And now white can play this queen to b3, attacking the bishop on b7. And also in some possible lines now that the queen's moved to d7, white can play bishop takes f6 when black is forced to double his pawns and play g takes f6. So this is the advantage of throwing this check in. So let's just play a couple more moves. Bishop to c6. And now white can consider opening up the position. He has other options, but d takes e5. It's very logical. D takes e5, and now an interesting possibility here would be knight to c4. This is another typical Tao idea, moving forwards and having a bit of disregard for your pieces here. Because, okay, black could play queen takes d3, but then we have quite an interesting position after knight takes e5 here. And white has a number of threats here, even though he's a piece down. One threat is simply to capture the queen on d3. The second threat is to capture the bishop on c6. And finally, white is also threatening to play queen takes f7 check with rook to d1 coming in. So this looks very dangerous to me, this position. I don't know if black can defend this, but you certainly wouldn't like to have this position against Tao, one of the best attackers in history. So b takes c5, if we go back to the position, doesn't look so good for black. So again, when you're getting to these interactive moments in the DVD, I mean, I did recommend in the first game that you play along with a chessboard if you have time. Okay, if you don't, if you just want to watch the DVD and pick options, fair enough. But you have to really also do a little bit of calculation in your head. I don't want you to be too lazy with these DVDs. I mean, okay, I'm prone to be lazy myself, but you've got to at least do a little bit of calculation when you pick your possibilities, just to make sure they are tactically sound, as well as having the right kind of instinctive presence to them. So after pawn to c5, black decided to play d takes c5. So this is how the game continued. So now white played taken on e5, d takes e5. So this is really Tao's idea to open up the position, and now his dark square bishop comes a lot stronger because you have this diagonal on h2 down to b8 available for it. But we have lost a pawn, and black's pawn formation is extremely solid. I mean, just look at this queenside pawn mass over here. How are we going to break through that, the majority over here on the c file? So nothing's clear in this position yet. So Tao really has to still play a bit of magic here to win this game. Okay, black plays queen takes e5, so he reins his pawn up. And now Tao played queen to a4 check. So this is one of his main ideas in this variation, to annoy black by throwing his queen to the square. And black now played pawn to c6. Now, I think this pawn to c6 is a slight mistake. This is the kind of move I wouldn't like to play myself, because it now makes my bishop on b7 look like a big turkey. And we only like turkey for Christmas. So I think a better idea here would be to try to get this king somewhere safe. So kingside castling looks like an option here. So I think if I was black here, I'd just put my knight back on d7. Knight on 8 to d7, blocking the check, and maybe giving myself options now castling kingside and queenside. I mean, one potential line after this is knight to d7. Okay, we can play rook to c1 here. This looks a bit passive. Let's say bishop takes f6. I think this is what Tao suggested he'd play, and his idea was that now black will have to lose a couple of tempo before he can castle. For example, after queen takes f6, because he can't now castle kingside because the knight on d7 is on pre. He can't castle queenside because a7 is on pre. But I don't really think this is a big problem for black here. I mean, he can maybe on his next move play queen to e7, defending the knight on d7, and then just castle kingside. And it kind of looks to me like there's not so much play for the pawn here. I'm sure Tao would have drummed something up here. You know, that's what he's a master at. Maybe it was something like bishop to b5, something along those lines. But this is certainly a much safer way for black to play after queen to a4 check. Because the way the game went after queen to a4 check, okay, black now made his bishop this turkey by playing c6. And already I think white has now quite good options. So this is your second interactive moment here already. So after pawn to c6, you're now again, okay, try to put yourself in Tao's shoes here. So what will you play in this position? You are Tao, you're white, your opponent's just played pawn to c6. You've got to try to justify your sacrificial pawn you've given up. Otherwise, what's the point of sacrificing this pawn? So how are you going to justify your sacrificed pawn? So your three options here are option number 1 is queen to c2. Option number 2 is knight to c4. Option number 3 is kingside castling. So they're your three options. Try to pick the right solution.